AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my new apartment, even though she claims I owe her because I moved in first. I, 33F, recently signed a lease for a two-bedroom apartment in the city. It's nothing extravagant, but it's comfortable, safe, and finally gives me a space I can truly call my own. I've spent the last 10 years living with roommates, dealing with shared responsibilities, unpaid rent, and noisy neighbors. Saving enough to afford this place on my own took years of careful budgeting, extra work, and sacrifices, so having my own apartment feels like a major milestone. I take pride in keeping it clean, organized, and personal. My sister, Lily, 28F, has had a much more unstable living situation. After college, she moved to the city but has bounced between temporary sublets, friends' apartments, and occasional stays with our parents. She earns a decent salary but struggles to save consistently and tends to spend impulsively, which often puts her in difficult financial situations. A few weeks ago, her current housing situation collapsed. Her roommate moved out unexpectedly, and she didn't have enough money to renew the lease on her own, leaving her without a place to stay. A few days after moving in, Lily called me, sounding panicked. She asked if she could move into my apartment until she got back on her feet. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with her living with me indefinitely. My apartment is small. I use the second bedroom as a home office, and having a full-time roommate, even temporarily, would disrupt my daily routines. I also value my privacy, especially after years of living with roommates, and I was not willing to compromise the independence I had worked so hard to achieve. She immediately became defensive. She accused me of being selfish and claimed I was prioritizing my comfort over family. She reminded me of all the ways she had helped me over the years, covering small bills when I was short, helping me move furniture, and supporting me emotionally during difficult periods. According to her, those past favors mean that I now owe her a place to stay, and since I moved into my apartment first, it's my responsibility to let her live there. I tried to reason with her. I told her that the help she had given me in the past was never intended as a debt that she could collect later. I explained that having her live in my apartment indefinitely would interfere with my work, disrupt my routines, and jeopardize the independence I finally earned. I offered compromises. She could stay for a weekend or a few days, I could help her find temporary housing, or I could contribute financially to a short-term lease. She refused all options, insisting that only living in my apartment full-time would solve her problem. The argument escalated when she began involving our parents. She told them that I was refusing to help her in a time of need and that I was being ungrateful and cold. Some relatives suggested I should think about family first and warned that my refusal could damage our relationship permanently. Others acknowledged that my apartment is my personal space and that it's reasonable to set boundaries, even with family. I felt torn because I wanted to support her, but I also felt justified in protecting my independence and my home. Lily has been sending increasingly emotional texts, claiming that I'm punishing her for circumstances beyond her control, that I don't care about family, and that I'm prioritizing my comfort over her well-being. I feel guilty because she's genuinely struggling and I want to help, but I also know that giving in would create a precedent, encourage dependency, and disrupt my life. I'm concerned about precedent because Lily has a history of relying on friends or family for extended periods, sometimes overstaying her welcome or disregarding house rules. Allowing her to move in now could create tension if she doesn't respect boundaries and could set expectations that I'm always obligated to accommodate her. I want to help her, but I also need to protect my privacy, independence, and the home I worked so hard to secure. Some friends have told me I should compromise and let her stay for a few weeks to support her, emphasizing family loyalty. Others agree with me, saying that my apartment is my sanctuary and that protecting my space and independence is reasonable. I've considered offering financial assistance, helping her find temporary housing, or co-signing a short-term lease, but she refuses anything that doesn't involve moving into my apartment full-time. I want to support her in ways that don't jeopardize my well-being, but she interprets any boundary I set as selfish. The situation is already straining our relationship, and I fear that giving in could create long-term resentment or dependence. At the same time, refusing her makes me feel guilty because I care about her and want to help. I feel like either choice, letting her move in indefinitely or refusing, risks harming our relationship and causing lasting tension. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister live in my apartment indefinitely, even though she claims I owe her because I moved in first. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my childhood friend stay in my apartment indefinitely, even though she says it would only be temporary. I, 34F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city that I've been renting for 6 years. It's my first place I've ever lived on my own, and over the years, I've carefully organized and decorated it to suit my lifestyle. I work from home, I keep a strict routine, and I really value my personal space and privacy. Having a place that feels like my own has been a huge source of stability and comfort for me. My childhood friend, Sophie, 33F, has been in my life since we were in elementary school. We were inseparable growing up and have maintained our friendship as adults, though our lives have taken different paths. Sophie has always had a harder time with stability. She's moved frequently, changed jobs often, and has had periods of financial difficulty. Over the years, I've helped her in small ways, letting her crash on my couch for a night, giving her advice, or helping her move apartments. It's always been short-term and manageable. About a month ago, Sophie called me sounding frantic. She explained that she had been evicted from her apartment because she couldn't keep up with rent and that her savings were almost gone. She said she had nowhere else to go and asked if she could move into my apartment until she got back on her feet. She emphasized that it would be temporary, maybe a few months at most, and that she would be careful not to impose. She framed it as a desperate situation and said she trusted me more than anyone else. I was immediately uneasy. My apartment is small, I live alone, and taking in Sophie for months would completely disrupt my life, work, and routines. I told her that while I wanted to help her, I wasn't comfortable with her living with me for an extended period. I suggested alternatives. She could stay with other friends or family, find a short-term rental, or I could help her financially with a deposit or first month's rent. I offered to help her search for temporary housing and even suggested splitting the cost of a small furnished apartment nearby so she could stay somewhere safe while she rebuilt her finances. Sophie insisted that my apartment would be perfect, that it was just temporary, and that she could easily adapt to my routines. She said she would take care of her own meals, cleaning, and anything else that might make the arrangement easier. She framed it as me helping her in a true crisis and implied that a good friend would say yes. She also said that she didn't feel comfortable staying with anyone else, and that being in my apartment would give her the stability she needed to find a new job and apartment. I told her again that I wasn't comfortable with a long-term stay. I explained that my home is my sanctuary, and that having her there for months could cause tension, stress, and possibly strain our friendship. I emphasized that I wanted to help her in ways that didn't involve her living in my apartment, and I offered concrete assistance with finances, temporary housing, and job leads. I tried to make it clear that this wasn't about not caring about her, but about my own boundaries and well-being. Sophie got upset and emotional. She accused me of being selfish and said that a good friend would help in a time of real need. She implied that I was prioritizing my comfort over her well-being and that my refusal hurt her deeply. She also told a few mutual friends about the situation, framing me as unsympathetic and uncaring. Some of my friends have suggested I should compromise because it's just temporary, while others agree that my boundaries are reasonable and necessary for my mental health. I feel guilty because I do care about her and want her to be safe, but I also feel like my boundaries are fair. I've offered support in multiple ways, helping financially, helping search for temporary apartments, giving job leads, and offering emotional support, but she refuses to accept anything that doesn't. involve her living in my home. I've considered letting her stay for a short weekend just to get her settled temporarily, but I worry that temporary could easily stretch into months, and I'm not prepared for that. I want to maintain our friendship, but I also need to protect my independence and my personal space. I feel like saying no is necessary for my own well-being, and giving in could lead to resentment or long-term strain on both our friendship and my daily life. So AITA for refusing to let my childhood friend stay in my apartment indefinitely, even though she claims she has nowhere else to go and insists it would only be temporary. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into the house my grandparents left me after he burned through my college fund. I, 36F, have had a complicated relationship with my family for years because of money and responsibility. Growing up, my younger brother, Jake, 32M, was always the golden child in my parents' eyes, and I often felt like I had to work twice as hard to be acknowledged. They praised him for his potential and spin on him without limits, while I was expected to be careful and independent. When I was 18, I got accepted into a good state university with a partial scholarship, which covered most of my tuition. My parents told me they had a college fund saved for me that would cover my remaining tuition, room, board, and books. I planned my life around that promise. Then, about a month before classes started, they told me the money had been spent on Jake. According to them, he had an opportunity to attend a summer program abroad and participate in extracurriculars that would set him up for life. They insisted that it was crucial to redirect my fund to cover his expenses. I had no choice but to take out loans and work 2 part-time jobs while taking a full course load. The financial strain was immense, and it took me over a decade to pay off all my debt. Meanwhile, Jake completed his program without worry and went on to enjoy opportunities one could only dream of. He never had to struggle financially in the way I did, which created a long-standing imbalance and resentment, though I tried to move past it. Recently, my grandparents passed away, leaving me their house. They had made it clear in the will that I was the sole inheritor, citing the help and support I had given them in their later years. I was grateful, but also aware that this might stir up family tensions, given Jake's history of entitlement. Sure enough, a few weeks after the will was executed, Jake asked if he could move in temporarily. He claimed he had lost his job and needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. At first, I was hesitant. I reminded him that I had struggled for years to achieve financial independence and that I needed to maintain my space, my security, and my peace of mind. He argued that it would only be temporary and that I could help family in a meaningful way. I refused. I explained that the house was left to me for a reason and that letting him move in would create tension, disrupt my life, and potentially endanger my financial stability if anything went wrong. I also reminded him of how my college fund was used to support him years ago and that I had already sacrificed a great deal to cover my own needs. Jake reacted badly. He accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and cold. He said that family should help each other and that refusing to let him stay made me exactly like our parents, only without the excuse of ignorance. He started going to our parents, telling them I was being unreasonable, which prompted them to start pressuring me as well. My parents called repeatedly, insisting that I let Jake move in because I am financially stable and he needs family. They framed it as a moral obligation, saying that I should support him in the way they failed to support me. They argued that refusing him would create lasting tension and that it would look bad in front of extended family. I offered compromises. I suggested helping him find a nearby apartment, assisting with job applications, contributing to a short-term hotel stay, or even helping him budget his finances. Every suggestion was dismissed. Jake insisted that nothing would work except moving into the house, and my parents implied that my refusal was proof of cruelty. The family drama has spilled over into extended relatives as well. Cousins and aunts have weighed in, with some saying I should help family in their time of need, and others privately agreeing that my stance is justified given the history of financial inequity. Jake has stopped speaking to me directly unless it's about moving in, and my parents have started making subtle comments at family events, painting me as selfish and unkind. I feel trapped. I want to support my brother, but not at the expense of my home, my security, and my hard-earned independence. I worry that if I let him move in, it will set a precedent for future financial or personal dependence that I cannot sustain. I have tried to be empathetic, reasonable, and helpful in ways that do not involve giving him a free place to live, but everyone seems to interpret my refusal as cruelty or selfishness. I am torn between protecting my well-being and maintaining family harmony. I love my brother and want him to succeed, but I also cannot ignore the years of struggle I endured because of past decisions that prioritized him over me. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move into the house my grandparents left me, even though my family says I should. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's destination wedding after years of her refusing to help me financially. I, 36F, have a younger sister, Lauren, 32F. Growing up, she was always the more outgoing and charming sibling, while I was introverted and financially cautious. Our parents often indulged her more, and she learned early on to rely on others to solve problems, including financial ones. I have always been responsible with money, saving for emergencies, investing, and living within my means. Lauren, on the other hand, has a long history of spending impulsively and expecting family or friends to cover for her mistakes. About 10 years ago, I was going through a rough time financially. I had just graduated from college and had unexpected medical bills that wiped out my savings. I reached out to Lauren for help, asking if she could lend me a small amount to cover rent and basic expenses. She refused outright, claiming she couldn't spare anything because she had her own priorities and that I needed to manage my own life. I was hurt and disappointed, but didn't push it. I managed to get by with part-time jobs, loans, and help from a few friends. Fast forward to the present. Lauren is engaged and planning a destination wedding in Greece. She invited me to be part of the wedding party and, shortly after, asked if I could contribute financially to the wedding, specifically toward flights, accommodations, and a portion of the venue costs. She suggested I could easily cover $12,000 to $15,000 and implied it was expected since I have stable income. I was taken aback. Not only is that amount well beyond what I could comfortably afford without going into debt, but it also felt like a slap in the face considering that Lauren refused to help me when I needed her. I told her that I could attend the wedding and help in other ways, planning events, assisting with logistics, or helping with DIY projects, but I could not contribute tens of thousands of dollars. Lauren was visibly upset and accused me of being selfish. She said that as her older sister, I should support her big day and that my refusal would make me look uncaring in front of the family. She even suggested that if I didn't contribute financially, I could skip the wedding altogether, which would look bad for my relationship with her. I reminded her that financial support is not an obligation and that I have consistently supported myself while she has relied on others when convenient. Things escalated when Lauren called our parents. She framed the situation as me refusing to support her dream wedding, and my parents, although sympathetic to my reasons, subtly hinted that I should reconsider to avoid family drama. A few cousins and aunts also reached out, saying that family should always step up for each other and implying that my refusal was stingy. I offered compromises multiple times. I could help plan pre-wedding events, coordinate local vendors, assist with decorations, or even host a small bridal shower in my home. Lauren refused all these options, insisting that only a financial contribution covering part of the wedding would be acceptable. She also mentioned that everyone else in the wedding party was contributing financially, and that by refusing, I was letting her down. I feel conflicted because part of me wants to be supportive. I love my sister and want her wedding to be a joyful occasion. But I also feel strongly that giving in would be unfair, given her past behavior and the enormous financial strain it would place on me. Additionally, contributing such a large sum would set a precedent that I would likely be expected to repeat for future events, which I cannot commit to. Some friends have told me I am right to set boundaries and that family should not demand financial support, no matter how close the relationship. Others argue that weddings are special and that helping a loved one in this way is part of being a supportive sibling. I understand that perspective, but I feel that after years of her relying on others without accountability, I am not obligated to fund her extravagance. Lauren has since started posting on social media about her stressful wedding planning and implied that I am not supportive. She has also told mutual friends that I refuse to help her in her time of need, which has created tension in our wider circle. I worry that this might permanently damage our relationship, but I also worry that giving and would reward years of irresponsibility and create resentment. AITA for refusing to pay $12,000 to $15,000 for my sister's destination wedding after years of her refusing to help me financially and repeatedly relying on others for support. AITA for refusing to let my best friend live in my apartment indefinitely, even though she insists I owe her because I moved in first. I, 34F, recently rented my first apartment alone. It's a modest 2-bedroom unit in the city, nothing extravagant, but comfortable, safe, and close to work. After years of living in shared housing and dealing with unreliable roommates, unpaid rent, and constant compromises, finally having a space of my own felt like a huge milestone. I worked long hours, saved aggressively, and made sacrifices to afford this apartment, so it represents independence, stability, and hard work. I take pride in keeping it organized, clean, and maintaining a personal space where I can feel at peace. My best friend, Mia, 33F, has had a far less stable living situation. She moved to the city several years ago for work, but she has bounced between temporary rentals, sublets, and staying with friends. She has a good job, but tends to spend impulsively and rarely saves, which often leaves her scrambling to find housing when leases end or roommates leave. Recently, her current living arrangement fell through when her roommate moved out unexpectedly, and her lease ended at the same time, leaving her without a place to stay. A few days after moving into my apartment, Mia called me, panicked, asking if she could move in until she got back on her feet. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with her moving in indefinitely. My apartment is small. I use the second bedroom as an office for remote work, and having a full-time roommate, even temporarily, would interfere with my work, routines, and personal life. I also value my privacy and independence after years of shared housing, and I wasn't willing to compromise it to accommodate her long-term. She immediately became defensive. She accused me of being selfish and claimed I was putting my comfort above friendship. She reminded me of all the times she had helped me in the past, covering small bills, helping me move, and supporting me emotionally during difficult periods. According to her, these favors now entitle her to live in my apartment. She argued that since I moved in first and secured my own place, I owe her access. I tried to reason with her. I told her that the help she gave me in the past was never intended as a debt to be collected later, and that my apartment is my personal space, not a family dormitory or hotel. I explained that having her live there indefinitely would disrupt my life, interfere with work, and compromise the independence I finally achieved. I offered compromises. She could stay for a weekend or a few days. I could help her find temporary housing, or I could contribute to a short-term rental. She refused every alternative, insisting that only moving in full-time would resolve her problem. The situation escalated when she involved mutual friends. Mia told them I was refusing to help her in a time of crisis and claimed that I was cold and ungrateful. Some friends privately messaged me, suggesting I let her stay for a few weeks, arguing that friendship requires sacrifice. Others acknowledged that my apartment is mine, and that it is reasonable to set boundaries even with a close friend. I feel torn because I want to support her, but I also feel justified in protecting my home, my routine, and my hard-earned independence. Mia has been sending increasingly emotional and guilt-inducing messages. She claims I am punishing her for circumstances beyond her control, that I don't care about our friendship, and that having my own apartment should not prevent me from helping her. I feel guilty because she's in a difficult situation and I want to help, but I also know that giving in would set a precedent, enable dependency, and potentially disrupt our relationship permanently. I'm also concerned about precedent. Mia has a history of staying with friends for extended periods, sometimes overstaying her welcome and disregarding house rules. Allowing her to move in now could create tension if she doesn't respect boundaries, and it could set expectations that I'm always obligated to accommodate her. I want to support her without compromising my own independence. But she interprets any boundary as selfishness. Some friends have told me I should compromise and let her stay for a few weeks to support her, emphasizing loyalty and compassion. Others have said that my apartment is my sanctuary and that I have the right to refuse full-time residence, even to a close friend. I considered offering financial help, helping her find temporary housing, or even co-signing a short-term lease, but she refuses anything that doesn't involve moving in full-time. I want to help her in ways that don't jeopardize my well-being, but she sees any refusal as a personal attack. The situation is already straining our friendship, and I fear that giving in could create long-term resentment or dependency. At the same time, refusing her makes me feel guilty because I care about her and want to help. I feel like either choice, letting her stay indefinitely or refusing, risks harming our relationship and causing lasting tension. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend live in my apartment indefinitely, even though she insists I owe her because I moved in first. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my house, even though he says he has nowhere else to go and it would only be temporary. I, 38F, bought my first home about a year ago. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. After years of renting and saving, finally having a place that's completely mine feels like a huge accomplishment. I love that I can decorate how I want, organize my routines, and have a space where I feel safe and independent. My home is my sanctuary, and I value my privacy more than anything. My brother, Kyle, 32M, has always had a difficult time staying stable. He's had multiple short-term jobs, moved frequently, and has struggled financially for years. I've helped him in small ways, loaning him money for emergencies, letting him crash on my couch for a few nights, or helping him move, but nothing long-term. He's often been unreliable and has a history of overextending his stay when people help him, so I've always been cautious about setting boundaries. A few weeks ago, Kyle called me sounding desperate. He said his apartment lease was ending immediately because he hadn't paid rent, and he had no friends or family to turn to. He asked if he could move into my house temporarily until he got back on his feet. He said it would only be a few months and emphasized that it would make a huge difference to him to have a stable place to live. He framed it as me helping him in a real emergency and implied that a good sister would say yes. I was immediately hesitant. My house is my personal space, and having him there for months would disrupt my life, routines, and work. I told him that I understood his situation and wanted to help, but I wasn't comfortable with him moving in long term. I suggested alternatives. He could stay with other family members, rent a short-term apartment, or I could help him financially with deposits or first month's rent. I even offered to help him search for temporary housing or connect him with local programs that offer emergency accommodations. Kyle insisted that my house would be perfect, that it was spacious enough, and that he would be careful not to disrupt my life. He kept repeating that it was just temporary, and that I was the only person he trusted. He implied that refusing would make me a bad sister, and that I was putting my comfort ahead of his well-being. I told him firmly again that I wasn't comfortable with a long-term stay. I explained that my house is my sanctuary, and that having him there for months could create stress and tension for both of us. I emphasized that I wanted to help him in ways that didn't involve him living in my home, but he refused to consider any alternatives. I offered to help financially, assist with moving logistics, and even give advice on budgeting and job leads, but he wouldn't accept anything that didn't involve moving in. After I refused, Kyle became upset and accusatory. He told me I was selfish and that family should come first. He said it was hurtful that I wouldn't help him in a time of crisis and suggested that I didn't care about him. He also told some mutual friends about the situation, framing me as cold and unsupportive. Some relatives have contacted me privately, suggesting I should make an exception and let him stay temporarily. Others agree that my boundaries are reasonable, especially given his history of staying longer than planned in the past. I feel guilty because I do care about him and want him to be safe, but I also feel that my boundaries are fair. I've offered support in multiple ways: financial help, finding temporary housing, helping with job leads, and emotional support, but he refuses to accept anything less than moving into my house. I've considered letting him stay for a short weekend just to help him transition, but I worry that temporary could easily stretch into months, and I'm not prepared to compromise my independence for that long. I want to maintain our relationship, but I also need to protect my home and personal life. I feel like saying no is necessary for both my mental health and the long-term health of our relationship. Giving in could lead to resentment, stress, and potentially damage both our bond and my daily life. I've tried to communicate calmly and reasonably, but he frames my refusal as a lack of care and compassion. So AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my house, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go and insists it would only be temporary. AITA for refusing to co-sign a loan for my sister after she spent my college fund. I, 35F, have had a complicated relationship with my sister, Anna, 31F, and our family dynamics have always been heavily influenced by money. Growing up, our parents favored Anna when it came to spending and opportunities, while I was expected to be responsible and self-sufficient. I was always cautious with money, save what I could, and plan for the future, while Anna seemed to operate under the assumption that she could ask for financial help whenever she wanted. When I turned 18, I received a partial scholarship to attend a well-regarded state university. My parents told me that they had been saving a fund to cover my remaining tuition, living expenses, and books. I trusted them completely and planned my life around that promise. About a month before classes started, I was informed that the fund had been spent on Anna. She had an opportunity to participate in an elite summer program overseas, and my parents insisted it was essential that the money go toward her tuition, travel, and fees. I had no choice but to take out loans and work multiple part-time jobs while attending school full-time. The financial burden lasted for years, and I struggled constantly, barely keeping up with bills while trying to maintain my grades. Meanwhile, Anna completed her program, enjoyed travel, hobbies, and extra courses, and never experienced the financial pressure I did. The disparity created long-standing tension between us, and although I tried to move past it, I have always remembered the sacrifices I had to make to compensate for their decision. Fast forward to now. I have a stable career as a financial analyst, own a condo, and am completely debt-free. Anna, on the other hand, has had a series of unstable jobs and recently expressed a desire to start a small business. She came to me asking if I would co-sign a loan for her, saying that banks won't give her financing without a co-signer. She argued that the business is her dream and that co-signing the loan would only be temporary and that I wouldn't have to pay anything unless she defaulted. I immediately refused. I reminded her of my experience with college loans and the fact that I had worked and struggled for years to pay off the debt that existed because my college fund was spent on her. I explained that I could not trust her to handle a large sum of money responsibly, and that co-signing the loan would put my financial security at risk. I also told her that while I want her to succeed, she needs to be accountable for her own finances and not rely on me as a safety net. Anna reacted badly. She accused me of holding grudges and being selfish. She argued that co-signing would not require me to spend any money up front and that it was an easy way to help family. She said that I was letting the past dictate my actions now and that I should put family first. My parents got involved shortly after. They called and texted repeatedly, insisting that I should help Anna because I'm financially stable and could easily co-sign without consequences. They framed it as a moral obligation, claiming that if I refused, I would be seen as unkind, selfish, or ungrateful by the rest of the family. They argued that Anna's business is a meaningful opportunity and that family should support each other. I offered alternative ways to help, such as assisting with business planning, finding grants, improving her credit score, or helping her research loans she could qualify for independently. Anna dismissed all of these, insisting that only co-signing would allow her to start the business. My parents also rejected these compromises, saying I was being difficult and overthinking the situation. This conflict has now spread to extended family. Some relatives have suggested I should co-sign to show family loyalty, while others privately told me that my decision is reasonable considering my history with Anna and the risks involved. Anna has stopped speaking to me directly unless it's about the loan, and my parents have started making subtle remarks at family gatherings, implying that I am selfish and unsupportive. I feel trapped. On one hand, I want to maintain a relationship with my sister and support her ambitions. On the other hand, I cannot ignore years of financial inequity, nor can I risk my stability for something that she might mismanage or default on. Co-signing a loan is not a simple favor. It carries serious financial responsibility, and I cannot take that on lightly after what I endured in my early adulthood. I have tried to remain calm and reasonable, offering non-financial support to help her succeed while protecting my own financial security. Despite my efforts, my refusal is being interpreted as cruelty and lack of family loyalty. I am struggling to balance my desire to help her with my need to protect myself. So, AITA for refusing to co-sign a loan for my sister after she spent my college fund, even though my parents say I should help. AITA for refusing to let my husband's sister move in after she repeatedly caused chaos in our family. I, 39F, have been married to my husband, Ryan, 41M, for 12 years. We have 2 kids together, ages 8 and 6, and we own a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Ryan's younger sister, Emily, 32F, has a long history of being difficult to live with. She is charming and sweet when she wants something, but she rarely takes responsibility for her actions. Over the years, she's moved in with friends or family multiple times and has caused tension wherever she stayed. She has a pattern of spending irresponsibly, borrowing money and not paying it back, ignoring house rules, and leaving messes behind. A few months ago, Emily called Ryan in a panic. She had been evicted from her apartment due to unpaid rent and claimed she had nowhere to go. She asked if she could move into our home temporarily, just until she got back on her feet. Ryan immediately thought of her as family and asked me what I thought. I was hesitant from the beginning because our house is already busy with our 2 kids, work schedules, and my need for a peaceful home environment. I explained that I could not accommodate her unless she followed strict rules. She would contribute to rent, chores, groceries, and follow our household guidelines. Ryan agreed that this was fair. Emily moved in, and it quickly became apparent that nothing would be simple. She ignored the rules we set, saying they were too strict and that she didn't need to be told what to do as an adult. She would leave dirty dishes for days, take food without replacing it, and play loud music late at night. She would bring friends over without telling us, and the house quickly became chaotic. The kids became irritable, my work-from-home schedule was constantly disrupted, and I felt my space invaded. I tried to talk to Ryan about it, saying that this arrangement was not temporary if nothing changed. Emily would casually mention that she might need to stay a bit longer and claim that she had no other options. I reminded Ryan that when I was in financial trouble during college, Emily refused to help me. I felt like history was repeating itself. She expected support and shelter without accountability or effort on her part. About 2 weeks after moving in, I told Ryan that I could not continue with Emily staying in our home. I said that if we wanted to help her, it had to be in a way that didn't disrupt our family life or jeopardize our well-being. I suggested alternatives, helping her find temporary housing through friends, assisting with job applications, helping her apply for short-term rentals, and even contributing to a few months' rent for an apartment. Ryan agreed in principle, but when he spoke to Emily, she became defensive, saying we were forcing her out and accusing me of being selfish and uncaring. Emily then started passive-aggressive behavior. She left notes around the house, saying things like, "I guess family doesn't care," and "some people only think of themselves." She also began posting vague complaints on social media about being abandoned by family in her time of need. Ryan tried to mediate, but he was stressed because he didn't want to hurt Emily, and he also didn't want to upset our household dynamic. Some extended family members reached out, implying that I should be more accommodating because she is family and that we should help her no matter what. I explained the history and the repeated behavior patterns, but they often dismissed my concerns. Friends outside the family, however, have supported my stance, saying that setting boundaries is reasonable and necessary to maintain a healthy home environment. I feel guilty because Emily is in a difficult situation, and I want to help her, but allowing her to stay would reinforce irresponsibility and create ongoing tension. I want to offer support in ways that encourage independence, but Emily sees anything less than living with us for free as rejection. Ryan is caught in the middle. He wants to support his sister, but also recognizes that the current arrangement is unsustainable and damaging to our family life. AITA for refusing to let my husband's sister move in after she repeatedly ignored house rules, caused chaos in our household, and has a history of relying on others without taking responsibility. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my new apartment, even though he says I owe him because I moved in first. I, 31M, recently signed a lease for my first solo apartment. It's a modest 2-bedroom unit in a safe neighborhood, close to work, and finally gives me a place I can truly call my own. I've spent over a decade living with roommates and in shared housing, dealing with conflicts over bills, chores, and noisy neighbors. Saving for this apartment took years of careful budgeting, overtime work, and sacrifices, so finally having my own space feels like a huge accomplishment. I take pride in maintaining it, keeping it organized, and having a space where I can relax without worrying about others. My younger brother, Daniel, 27M, has had a far less stable living situation. He moved to the city after college, but has bounced between sublets, short-term rentals, and occasionally staying with friends or our parents. He has a good job, but he's inconsistent with his finances, often spending impulsively and failing to save. Recently, his living situation fell apart when his roommate moved out unexpectedly, leaving him without a place to stay and scrambling to find housing. A week after I moved in, Daniel called me, clearly stressed, asking if he could move into my apartment until he got back on his feet. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with him living there indefinitely. My apartment is small. I use the second bedroom as a home office for remote work, and having a full-time roommate, even temporarily, would disrupt my daily routines. I also value my privacy and independence. And after years of shared living, I was not willing to compromise the first real space I've had for myself. Daniel immediately became defensive. He accused me of being selfish and said I was prioritizing my comfort over family. He reminded me of all the ways he had helped me over the years, covering small expenses, helping me move furniture, and supporting me emotionally during hard times. According to him, those favors now entitle him to live in my apartment. He argued that since I moved in first, I owe him access and that a sibling should always help when needed. I tried to reason with him. I told him that the help he had given me in the past was never intended as a debt to be collected later, and that my apartment is my personal space, not a family dormitory. I explained that letting him live there indefinitely would interfere with work, disrupt my routines, and compromise the independence I had finally achieved. I offered compromises. He could stay for a weekend or a few days, I could help him find temporary housing, or I could contribute financially to a short-term lease. He refused all options, insisting that only moving in full-time would solve his problem. The argument escalated when he involved our parents. Daniel told them I was refusing to help him in a time of crisis and claimed I was being ungrateful and cold. Some relatives suggested I should prioritize family over my comfort and warned that my refusal could damage our relationship permanently. Others acknowledged that my apartment is my personal space and that it's reasonable to set boundaries, even with a sibling. I feel torn because I want to support him, but I also feel justified in protecting my independence and my home. Daniel has been sending increasingly emotional texts, claiming I'm punishing him for circumstances beyond his control and that I don't care about family. He insists that since I moved in first, it's my responsibility to ensure he has a place to stay. I feel guilty because he's genuinely struggling, and I want to help him, but I also know that giving in would create a precedent, encourage dependency, and disrupt my life. I'm concerned about precedent, because Daniel has a history of relying on friends or family for extended periods, sometimes overstaying his welcome or disregarding house rules. Allowing him to move in now could create tension if he doesn't respect boundaries, and it could set expectations that I am always obligated to accommodate him. I want to help him, but I also need to protect my privacy, independence, and the home I work years to secure. Some friends have told me I should compromise and let him stay for a few weeks to support him, emphasizing family loyalty. Others agree with me, saying that my apartment is my sanctuary and that protecting my space and independence is reasonable. I've considered offering financial assistance, helping him find temporary housing, or co-signing a short-term lease, but he refuses anything that doesn't involve moving in full time. I want to support him in ways that don't jeopardize my well-being, but he interprets any boundary I set as selfish. The situation is already straining our relationship, and I fear that giving in could create long-term resentment or dependency. At the same time, refusing him makes me feel guilty because I care about him and want to help. I feel like either choice, letting him move in indefinitely or refusing, risks harming our relationship and causing lasting tension. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my apartment, even though he says I owe him because I moved in first. AITA for refusing to let my cousin move into my apartment, even though she insists it would only be temporary and she has nowhere else to go. I, 35F, have lived in my apartment for about 7 years. It's a 2-bedroom place I rent in the city, and it's the first home I've had that truly feels like mine. Over the years, I've decorated it, organized it, and built routines around it. I work from home, and having a stable, private environment is essential for both my mental health and productivity. I really value the independence and control I have over my space. My cousin, Hannah, 30F, has always struggled with stability. She's moved around a lot, never really held a long-term job, and has had financial difficulties for years. Over the past decade, I've helped her in small ways, loaning money for emergencies, letting her crash on my couch for a night, and helping her move. I've always tried to be supportive, but only in short-term, manageable ways. A few weeks ago, Hannah called me in panic. She explained that her lease had ended unexpectedly, and she had nowhere else to go. She asked if she could move into my apartment until she got back on her feet. She emphasized that it would only be temporary, maybe a few months, and that she would be careful not to disrupt my life. She also said she trusted me more than anyone else, and that it would make a huge difference for her to have a stable place to stay. I was immediately hesitant. My apartment is small, I live alone, and taking her in for months would completely disrupt my routines and personal space. I told her that while I wanted to help her, I couldn't have her move in long term. I suggested alternatives. She could stay with other relatives, rent a short-term place, or I could help her financially with a deposit or first month's rent. I also offered to help her search for temporary accommodations, assist with job leads, and provide advice on budgeting and financial planning. Hannah insisted that my apartment was perfect for her and that it would only be temporary. She said she would respect my space, handle her own meals, and do whatever was necessary to minimize disruption. She framed it as a real emergency and implied that a true family member would agree to help in this way. She said that staying with anyone else would be uncomfortable and that she trusted me the most. I told her again that I wasn't comfortable with a long-term stay. I explained that my home is my sanctuary, and having her there for months could create stress and tension for both of us. I emphasized that I wanted to help in ways that didn't involve her living in my home. I tried to compromise by offering financial support, assistance finding temporary housing, or even letting her stay for a single weekend. But she refused to consider any alternatives that didn't involve moving in. After I refused, Hannah became upset and accusatory. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't care about her well-being. She implied that I was prioritizing my comfort over her safety and stability. She also told some mutual friends and relatives about the situation, portraying me as cold and unsupportive. Some friends have suggested I should compromise and allow her to stay temporarily because she has nowhere else to go, while others agree that my boundaries are reasonable and necessary for my mental health. I feel guilty because I care deeply about her and want her to be safe. I've tried to help her in every way I can without sacrificing my independence and personal space, but she refuses to accept anything less than moving in with me. I've considered letting her stay for a very short period, like a weekend, but I worry that temporary could easily stretch into months. I also worry about the impact on my mental health, work, and daily routines if she stayed any longer. I want to maintain our relationship, but I also need to protect my home and independence. Saying no feels like the responsible choice for both of us. I fear that giving in would lead to resentment, stress, and possibly damage our relationship in the long term. I've tried explaining calmly and reasonably, but she interprets it as a lack of care or support. So AITA for refusing to let my cousin move into my apartment, even though she claims she has nowhere else to go and insists it would only be temporary. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's dream wedding after she spent my college fund. I, 36F, have a complicated history with my family, mostly because of money and fairness. Growing up, my younger sister, Rachel, 32F, was always treated as the favored child. My parents tended to indulge her, give her expensive gifts, and prioritize her ambitions over mine. I was expected to be responsible, save my money, and plan carefully for the future. When I was 18, I received a partial scholarship to attend a reputable state university. My parents told me they had a college fund set aside for me that would cover the remaining tuition, books, and living expenses. I trusted them completely and structured my plans around that promise. About a month before classes started, I was told the fund had been spent on Rachel. She had been accepted into an exclusive summer program abroad, which our parents claimed was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that could not be missed. They insisted it was essential to use my college fund to pay for her tuition, travel, and related expenses. I had no choice but to take out loans and work 2 part-time jobs while attending full-time classes. I spent years under financial strain, juggling school, work, and debt repayment. Rachel, on the other hand, completed her program without financial stress and continued living comfortably. She had money to pursue hobbies, travel, and take extra classes. The difference in our experiences created long-term resentment, though I tried to focus on building my own life and moving past the financial unfairness. Fast forward to the present. I have a stable career as a project manager, own a small condo, and am financially independent. Rachel recently got engaged and announced she wants a lavish wedding, an elaborate event with 200 guests, a luxury venue, professional catering, and expensive decor. She approached me asking if I would contribute financially, claiming that my support would be crucial to make her dream wedding happen. She also suggested it could be framed as a gift rather than a loan, though she implied it would be expected that I cover a substantial portion. I was shocked. I immediately reminded her of how I had struggled for years paying off student loans that existed only because the money meant for my education had been spent on her. I explained that I could not justify spending thousands of dollars on a wedding for her when I had already been financially disadvantaged by past decisions. I offered alternative support, helping plan the wedding, assisting with budgeting, coordinating vendors, or even helping organize DIY decor to reduce costs. Rachel reacted angrily. She accused me of being selfish, holding grudges, and not caring about family. She said I was letting old grievances control my actions, and that family should support each other, especially for major life events. She argued that my contribution would make a huge difference and that refusing was cruel. My parents became involved shortly afterward. They called and texted repeatedly, insisting I should pay because I'm financially stable and could afford it. They framed my refusal as morally wrong, implying that I was being cold, ungrateful, and unsupportive. They said that family comes first and that helping Rachel financially is a duty, not a choice. I tried to explain that while I want to support Rachel emotionally and practically, I cannot repeat the pattern of being financially exploited. I stressed that contributing money would not only jeopardize my financial security, but could also damage our relationship if the wedding became a source of tension or if she mismanaged the funds. I reminded them that I had already sacrificed years of stability to cover the consequences of her earlier financial advantage. Some extended family members have weighed in, with a few suggesting I should help to show family loyalty, while others privately say I am justified given the history. Rachel and my parents have dismissed my offers of non-financial help, insisting that only a monetary contribution would suffice. They have also made subtle remarks at family gatherings and on group chats, portraying me as unsupportive and selfish. I feel trapped. On one hand, I want to maintain family harmony and help Rachel celebrate a major life milestone. On the other hand, I cannot overlook years of financial inequity or put myself at risk again, especially for something that is a personal luxury rather than a necessity. I also fear that giving her money could set a precedent, making me feel obligated to fund future milestones like vacations, new cars, or other expensive endeavors. I have tried to remain reasonable, empathetic, and supportive in ways that do not involve handing over large sums of money. I want to help, but I also have to protect my financial independence and emotional well-being after years of unfair treatment. My refusal is being interpreted as cruelty by my sister and my parents, leaving me feeling conflicted and attacked despite my attempts to compromise. So, AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's dream wedding after she spent my college fund, even though my parents say I should help. AITA for refusing to let my friend and her kids stay with me after she refused to help me years ago. I, 37F, have a friend, Vanessa, 36F, whom I've known since college. We were extremely close for years, sharing apartments, helping each other through breakups, and supporting each other in small ways. When I was in my late 20s, I went through a period where I was struggling financially. I had just finished grad school, my first job barely covered rent, and I had unexpected medical bills. I reached out to Vanessa, asking for help, even just a small loan or temporary support while I got back on my feet. She refused. She said she had her own life to manage and couldn't take on any additional responsibility. I was hurt, but I respected her boundaries at the time. I managed through friends, part-time jobs, and careful budgeting. Fast forward to now. Vanessa has 2 young kids, ages 7 and 9. Her husband left her last year, and she's been struggling financially. Her apartment has severe mold, and the landlord is threatening eviction unless she moves out immediately. She called me a few weeks ago asking if she and her children could stay with me temporarily, just for a couple of months while she figures things out. I have a comfortable home that I own, but I value my privacy and stability. I live alone and have a routine that works for me. I also have a career that requires focus and space, and I travel occasionally for work. I told Vanessa that I was sympathetic to her situation, but could not host her and her children for several months. I offered alternative support. I could help her find a short-term rental, assist in applying for housing assistance, help her locate childcare options, and offer financial advice or small contributions toward temporary accommodations. Vanessa immediately became upset. She said I was being selfish and heartless for not letting her stay in my home. She argued that since I am financially secure, it is my moral obligation to help her in her crisis. I reminded her that I had asked her for help in my time of need, and she refused, which made it difficult for me to just open my home now. I also explained that hosting 2 children for months would drastically affect my life, and that my offer to help in other ways was a practical solution that allowed me to support her without compromising my well-being. The situation escalated when Vanessa started messaging our mutual friends, framing me as someone who refuses to help her children in a crisis. A few of them reached out privately, asking why I wouldn't let her stay. Some suggested I should put aside personal convenience for family and friends, and that my refusal made me look unsympathetic. I feel hurt because the context of my past struggles and her repeated unwillingness to assist me seems to be ignored. I've also realized that allowing her to stay could set a precedent for future expectations. She could view my home as a fallback for any future crisis, and that is not something I am willing to risk. Additionally, she has a history of being demanding and disorganized, and I am concerned that living with me would create tension and stress, particularly with her children who would need attention and supervision. Vanessa suggested a compromise where she would contribute to groceries and bills, but she was vague on how much she could realistically contribute and implied that I should cover the rest. I told her that the arrangement still wouldn't work for me because it would involve months of constant disruption and responsibilities that I am not willing to take on. She accused me of holding grudges and said that I was punishing her for something that happened years ago. I do feel some guilt because the children genuinely need a safe place, and I empathize with her struggle. But I also know that giving in would likely reinforce her dependency, create stress in my life, and possibly damage my own stability. I have offered several forms of support that do not involve her living in my home, but she refuses everything except immediate accommodation in my space. My friends are divided. Some agree with me, saying that it is reasonable to set boundaries and that one cannot be responsible for solving another adult's recurring problems, even if children are involved. Others argue that I should make sacrifices for someone in need, especially since she is a mother and in a crisis situation. I am also concerned about the long-term impact on our friendship. Vanessa has said that our friendship may never be the same and that she feels betrayed, even though I'm trying to offer solutions that help without causing harm to my own life. I worry that refusing may cause resentment, but I also worry that letting her move in would cause stress, tension, and possible damage to my property or lifestyle. AITA for refusing to let my friend and her children stay with me temporarily after she refused to help me years ago, even though I'm offering alternative ways to support her during this crisis. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my apartment, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go and insists it would only be temporary. I, 36F, have lived in my apartment for nearly 8 years. It's a 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood that I rent on my own. Over the years, I've worked hard to make it my home, decorating it to my taste and building routines around it. I work from home most of the time, so having a stable, private space is essential to my mental health and productivity. My apartment is my sanctuary, and I value the independence it gives me. My brother, Ethan, 33M, has always had difficulty maintaining stability. He's had multiple short-term jobs, frequently moved from place to place, and often struggled financially. Over the years, I've helped him in small ways, lending him money for emergencies, letting him stay a night or two when he was between apartments, and helping him move. I've always tried to be supportive, but I've set boundaries because extended stays tend to stretch longer than he initially claims, which has caused tension in the past. A few weeks ago, Ethan called me sounding desperate. He said his apartment lease had been terminated due to unpaid rent. He had no savings, and he had nowhere else to turn. He asked if he could move into my apartment temporarily until he got back on his feet. He insisted that it would only be a few months at most and that he wouldn't be a burden. He said he trusted me more than anyone else and that having a stable place to stay would help him rebuild his life. I was immediately uncomfortable. My apartment is small, I live alone, and having him there for months would completely disrupt my routines, work, and privacy. I told him that while I wanted to help him, I wasn't comfortable with him moving in long term. I suggested alternatives. He could stay with other family members, rent a short-term apartment, or I could help him financially with deposits or first month's rent. I even offered to help him search for temporary housing, assist with job leads, and give advice on budgeting and financial planning. Ethan insisted that my apartment was perfect, that it would only be temporary, and that he would respect my space completely. He said that staying with anyone else would be inconvenient, and that he trusted me the most. He framed it as a genuine emergency and implied that a responsible and caring sibling would let him stay. I told him again that I wasn't comfortable with a long-term stay. I explained that my home is my sanctuary, and having him there for months could create tension, stress, and resentment. I emphasized that I wanted to help in ways that didn't involve him living in my home, offering concrete assistance like financial support and help finding temporary accommodations. I even proposed a compromise, like letting him stay for a weekend while he arranged something else, but he refused to consider any alternatives that didn't involve moving in. After I refused, Ethan became upset and accusatory. He told me I was selfish and implied that I didn't care about his well-being. He said it hurt him that I wouldn't help him in his time of need, and he suggested that I was putting my comfort above family. He also told mutual friends and some relatives about the situation, framing me as cold and unsupportive. Some relatives have contacted me privately, suggesting I should make an exception and let him stay temporarily. Others agree that my boundaries are reasonable, especially considering his history of overstaying and causing tension in past situations. I feel guilty because I care about him and want him to be safe, but I also feel that my boundaries are fair. I've offered support in multiple ways: financial help, finding temporary housing, helping with job leads, and emotional support, but he refuses to accept anything less than moving into my apartment. I've considered letting him stay for a very short period, like a weekend, but I worry that temporary could easily stretch into months. I also worry about the impact on my mental health, my routines, and my work if he stayed longer. I want to maintain our relationship, but I also need to protect my home and independence. Saying no feels like the responsible choice for both of us. I fear that giving in would lead to resentment, stress, and possibly damage our relationship in the long term. I've tried explaining calmly and reasonably, but he interprets it as a lack of care or support. So AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my apartment, even though he claims he has nowhere else to go and insists it would only be temporary. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my house after he spent my college fund. I, 36F, have had a complicated and strained relationship with my family for years, mostly because of money and fairness. Growing up, my younger brother, Kevin, 32M, was always treated like the golden child. My parents often gave him financial support without question, while I was expected to be responsible, save money, and plan carefully for the future. This difference in treatment caused tension between us even as children, though I tried to focus on my own responsibilities. When I was 18, I received a partial scholarship to attend a reputable state university. My parents assured me that a college fund they had been building for years would cover the remaining tuition, books, and living expenses. I trusted them completely and structured my plans around that promise. About a month before my first semester, I was told that the fund had been spent on Kevin. According to my parents, he had been accepted into a highly competitive summer program abroad, which they insisted was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and couldn't be missed. They said it was essential to redirect the money to cover his tuition, travel, and fees. I had no choice but to take out loans and work multiple part-time jobs while attending school full-time. It took over a decade to pay off the debt, and the financial and emotional strain was significant. Meanwhile, Kevin completed his program without financial difficulty and continued living comfortably. He traveled, pursued hobbies, and had opportunities one could never afford. This disparity created long-standing resentment, though I tried to focus on building my own life and moving forward. Recently, our grandparents passed away, leaving me their house. In their will, they specifically left the house to me, citing my support and care during their final years. I was grateful for this, though I knew that it might cause family tension, given Kevin's history of entitlement and expectation of financial assistance. Sure enough, a few weeks after the will was executed, Kevin asked if he could move into the house temporarily. He claimed he had lost his job and needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. I was immediately uncomfortable. I reminded him of the years I had struggled financially because of decisions that prioritized him over me. I explained that I needed to maintain my home, my independence, and my financial stability, and that allowing him to move in could compromise all three. Kevin reacted angrily. He accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and cold. He said that family should support each other in times of need, and that refusing him made me exactly like our parents, only without the excuse of ignorance. My parents got involved as well. They started pressuring me repeatedly, calling and texting to insist that I let Kevin move in. They framed it as a moral obligation, claiming that I was being heartless and that letting him stay would show family loyalty. I tried to offer compromise solutions. I suggested helping him find a nearby apartment, assisting with job applications, contributing to a short-term hotel stay, or helping him budget his finances. Kevin dismissed all of these ideas, insisting that only living in my house would work. My parents also rejected these alternatives, implying that I was being difficult and unreasonable. The conflict has spilled over into extended family. Cousins and aunts have weighed in, with some saying I should help Kevin because family comes first, while others privately say I'm justified, given the history of financial inequity. Kevin has stopped speaking to me directly unless it's about moving in, and my parents have started making subtle comments at family gatherings, portraying me as selfish and unsupportive. I feel trapped. On one hand, I want to maintain family harmony and support my brother in some way. On the other hand, I cannot ignore years of financial disadvantage caused by past decisions and put myself at risk again. I worry that letting him move in could set a precedent, making him expect me to bail him out financially or personally in the future. I have tried to remain calm, reasonable, and empathetic. I have offered non-financial and non-lodging support, but my refusal is being interpreted as cruelty. I am struggling to balance my desire to maintain family relationships with my need to protect my home, financial security, and emotional well-being. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my house after he spent my college fund. Even though my family says I should, AITA for refusing to lend my brother money after he repeatedly refused to help me when I needed it. I, 42F, have a younger brother, Jason, 37M, who has a long history of financial irresponsibility. Growing up, he was the charming one, always able to talk his way out of trouble, while I was the cautious and responsible sibling. Over the years, I built a stable life, a good career, a house, savings, and investments. Jason, on the other hand, has bounced between jobs, accumulated credit card debt, and frequently relied on friends and family to bail him out of financial crises. About 15 years ago, when I was in my mid-20s and fresh out of college, I was struggling financially. I had low-paying jobs, student loans, and unexpected medical bills. I asked Jason for a small loan, enough to cover rent and utilities for a month, hoping he could help. He flatly refused. His reasoning was that he had his own responsibilities and that I should figure it out myself. I was hurt, but managed to make ends meet with part-time work, borrowing a little from friends, and cutting expenses. Since then, Jason has continued to ask for money whenever he gets into financial trouble, often citing emergencies like overdue rent, medical bills, or car repairs. Each time, I have set firm boundaries. I rarely lend money anymore because he has shown a repeated pattern of irresponsibility and a lack of accountability. I have offered alternatives, like helping him budget, find resources, or negotiate bills, but he is usually unwilling to follow through. Recently, Jason called me in a panic. He had been laid off from his job and said he needed $20,000 to cover rent, groceries, and car repairs until he got another job. He expected me to lend him the full amount, insisting that I could afford it and that as his older sister, it was my duty to help. I was stunned and told him no. I reminded him that when I had been in a financial bind years ago, he refused to help me. I explained that lending him such a large sum would not only put my financial stability at risk, but also continue a pattern of enabling irresponsible behavior. Jason was furious. He said I was selfish, uncaring, and letting family down. He claimed that since I am financially secure, I have an obligation to help him, regardless of his past choices or behavior. He also told our mutual friends and some relatives that I refused to help him in a crisis, framing me as cruel and unreasonable. Several family members have reached out, asking why I wouldn't lend him the money and suggesting I make an exception because he is in urgent need. I have offered alternatives. I can help him find temporary financial assistance programs, assist in applying for unemployment benefits, help him negotiate with his landlord, and connect him with local charities that provide emergency rent or food support. I also offered to help him find short-term work and create a realistic budget to stabilize his finances. He refused all of these, insisting that only a direct loan from me would solve the problem. Some friends and colleagues say I am right to protect myself and maintain boundaries. Others argue that family sometimes requires sacrifices and that I should help him because he is in immediate distress. I understand both perspectives. I empathize with him. Being laid off and without money is stressful and frightening. But I also know that giving him $20,000 with no guarantee of repayment will not solve the root problem and will likely lead to resentment or further dependence. Jason has since stopped speaking to me directly and has begun posting vague statements on social media about family betrayal and selfish siblings. Some relatives are now subtly criticizing me, suggesting that I am cold or selfish. My parents are upset, but they acknowledge that I have a right to say no, though they wish I would help a family member in crisis. I feel conflicted. I want to help Jason in ways that promote independence and responsibility, but he sees anything less than giving him a huge sum of money as abandonment. I also worry about the long-term consequences of giving in. He may expect similar bailouts in the future, and it could create ongoing tension in the family. My mental health and financial security are important, and I cannot sacrifice them to bail him out repeatedly. AITA for refusing to lend my brother $20,000 after he repeatedly refused to help me in the past and continues to demonstrate financial irresponsibility despite offering alternative ways to support him. AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my apartment indefinitely even though she says I owe her because I moved in first. I, 35F, recently signed a lease for my first solo apartment in the city. It's a modest 2-bedroom unit in a safe neighborhood, close to work, and finally gives me a space I can truly call my own. I've spent over a decade living with roommates, subletting, and navigating shared housing conflicts like unpaid rent, loud neighbors, and clashing schedules. Saving for this apartment took years of careful budgeting, extra work, and sacrifices, so finally having a place that's entirely mine feels like a huge milestone. I take pride in keeping it clean, organized, and personal, and I enjoy having control over my daily routines and environment. My best friend, Claire, 34F, has had a much more unstable living situation. She moved to the city a few years ago, but she's bounced between temporary sublets, roommates who moved out unexpectedly, and occasionally staying with friends. She earns a decent salary but has trouble managing her finances consistently, often spending impulsively and failing to save, which leaves her scrambling for housing whenever her leases or arrangements fall through. Recently, her living situation collapsed when her roommate left suddenly, and she didn't have a backup plan, leaving her without a place to stay. A few days after I moved in, Claire called me, panicked. She asked if she could move into my apartment until she got back on her feet. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with her moving in indefinitely. My apartment is small, and I use the second bedroom as an office for my work, as well as a personal space for hobbies and relaxation. Having a full-time roommate, even temporarily, would disrupt my routines and limit my privacy. I also value my independence after years of shared housing, and am not willing to compromise the first space I've had entirely for myself. Claire immediately became defensive. She accused me of being selfish and said I was prioritizing my comfort over friendship. She reminded me of all the times she had helped me in the past, covering small expenses when I was short, helping me move furniture, and supporting me emotionally during difficult periods. According to her, those favors now entitle her to live in my apartment. She claimed that since I moved in first and finally secured my own place, I owe her access and that friends should support each other no matter the inconvenience. I tried to reason with her. I explained that the help she had given me in the past was never intended as a debt to be collected later, and that my apartment is my personal space, not a hotel or a communal living situation. I also explained that having her live there indefinitely would interfere with my work, disrupt my routines, and compromise the independence I had worked so hard to achieve. I offered compromises. She could stay for a weekend or a few days. I could help her find temporary housing, or I could contribute financially to a short-term sublet. She refused every alternative, insisting that only moving in full-time would solve her problem. The situation escalated when she involved mutual friends. Claire told them I was refusing to help her in a time of crisis and claimed that I was being ungrateful, cold, and selfish. Some friends privately messaged me, suggesting I let her stay for a few weeks, arguing that friendship requires sacrifice and that I was morally obligated to help. Others acknowledged that my apartment is mine and that it is reasonable to set boundaries, even with a close friend. I felt torn because I want to support her, but I also felt justified in protecting my independence and my home. Claire has been sending increasingly emotional and guilt-inducing messages. She claims I'm punishing her for circumstances beyond her control, that I don't value our friendship, and that my independence and comfort are somehow morally wrong. I feel guilty because she's genuinely struggling, and I want to help her. But I also know that giving in would create a precedent, encourage dependency, and potentially disrupt our relationship permanently. I'm also concerned about precedent. Claire has a history of staying with friends for extended periods, sometimes overstaying her welcome or disregarding house rules. Allowing her to move in now could create tension if she doesn't respect boundaries, and it could set expectations that I am always obligated to accommodate her. I want to support her without compromising my privacy, independence, or stability. Some friends have told me I should compromise and let her stay for a few weeks to support her, emphasizing loyalty and compassion. Others agree with me, saying that my apartment is my sanctuary and that protecting my space and independence is reasonable. I've considered offering financial assistance, helping her find temporary housing, or even co-signing a short-term lease, but she refuses anything that doesn't involve moving in full time. I want to support her in ways that don't jeopardize my well-being, but she interprets any boundary I set as selfish. The situation is already straining our friendship, and I fear that giving in could create long-term resentment or dependency. At the same time, refusing her makes me feel guilty because I care about her and want to help. I feel like either choice, letting her move in indefinitely or refusing, risks harming our relationship and causing lasting tension. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend live in my apartment indefinitely, even though she insists I owe her because I moved in first. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.